Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Mara Walsh and I am your host today. Before we get started on our virtual tour presentation, I have a few housekeeping items to review. Please know that you're on Zoom webinar, which is a bit different from the Zoom meeting you may be used to. Your video and microphone are not active and you will not be seen or heard. However, we do want to interact with you through the chat and the Q&A features on Zoom. Let's review some ways to optimize your computer or your device for the best possible viewing experience. So your audio, if you need to turn up your audio, you can do this in one of three ways. You can attach earbuds or a headset. This is by far the best way to hear on any device. You can turn up your computer audio, or you can adjust the audio settings in the Zoom on the Zoom toolbar. Your screen, for the best viewing presentation, please use the vertical toolbar between me and the slide and push it all the way to the video so I am very small and the presentation is very large. If you're on an iPhone, an iPad, a Kindle, or a handheld device, you may have to swipe left or right to see the presentation screen instead of the speaker. Okay, now we should be all set. Let's get going. I'm going to share a little bit about myself. As I said, my name is Mara Walsh. I'm coming to you from the United States, specifically between Philadelphia and New York on the East Coast. I started leading physical tours with EF Tours as a Girl Scout leader, taking girls and their families to international destinations every summer. I have since expanded my physical travel program. I now do adult-only tours and multi-generational tours. I use EF Go Ahead Tours for many of those group tours. I also use several other vendors. And I am a certified travel agent, so you can also book your dream trip as part of a group or on your own just by contacting me. In terms of the virtual tours, there's a couple of reasons why I started this series about 16 months ago. I really wanted to support the tour director community during this time of no work. I have a lot of friends that I've met through my travels that are tour guides and tour directors, and they have not been able to work now for about 18 months. I also really wanted to keep the excitement of travel alive for my travel group, as well as extend that opportunity to those of you who have learned about us through your friends, your family, Facebook, social media, and any other means. We've done more than 40 virtual tour presentations in the last year since COVID has struck. If you'd like to access any of the recordings, they are available on my website, Girl Travel Tours. They're also available on my Facebook page and my YouTube channel. Those three words, Girl Travel Tours, if you Google them and put Facebook or YouTube or girltraveltours.com, you will get to those tours and you can see the recordings of all past tours. And we do have several more tours planned for the upcoming months. We have a few that are already scheduled for this summer. Those include Wales and Cornwall, India, which is the Taj Mahal, Venice, and Jerusalem. As long as you're interested in viewing these virtual tour presentations, we will continue to produce them. I know that some of you are on Facebook right now streaming in, so welcome. And also some of you are new to this experience, and I just wanted to let you know that if you are on Facebook and you see any links in the chat or in the post, please don't click on them unless those links are coming from me, Girl Travel Tours. There are some imposters out there that are scamming people and trying to get them to sign up on different sites that are not legitimate. So please just be careful out there. Okay, before we get going, I want to share with you a few ways that you can interact with us. If you're on Zoom, you have the Q&A on your Zoom toolbar. Please reserve this tool for questions that you would like our guide to answer after the presentation, your guide or me to answer after the presentation. The chat mechanism, that's a great place to share your ideas, tell us where you're from, shout out a hello, give me some information about yourself. I love to interact with you during the presentation and I'll be happy to do so there. Facebook, you have a feed of interaction, so you can interact with one another, and you can also share your information with me. I will do my best to go back and forth between Facebook and Zoom and try to address both groups' concerns. Okay, so I always like to start our tours with an interactive poll. I'm going to launch the poll, which is essentially tell us a little about yourself and your connection with Sydney, Australia. I've been and love it. I have a trip booked. I plan to go in the future. I have no set plan, but I'm interested in the destination. Or I am solely interested in experiencing it virtually. I'll give you a second while you answer that, and I will tell you that I do not have a trip booked to Sydney, Australia, but I did go in 2018 with a group, and we absolutely loved it. It was always on my bucket list, and it's something that I've always wanted to do. And now there are some more regions in Australia that I'd like to go back and explore more. So for all of you, I'm going to end the poll. I'm going to share your results. And you'll see that many of you don't have set plans to go, but you're very interested in the location. And I hope that after this presentation, you will change your plans from just interested to booking a trip, because it is an amazing place that you need to experience firsthand. Okay, so a tour wouldn't be complete without a fantastic tour director. For those of you unfamiliar with group travel, a tour director is like a personal concierge who starts your tour with you and goes the length of your tour. They have a wealth of knowledge, they manage your travel plans, and they make sure your experience is full of education, it's stressless, and it's easy to navigate. These are by far the most important people on a tour group. And as you can imagine, our tour directors have not been working for more than a year now. So I'll share with you via the chat and during the Q&A a way that you can tip the tour director. This tour for you is free. However, it is a tip as you wish model. So if you are pleased with what you see and you appreciate the guide and his expertise, we would love to see you tip. Thank you. Okay, I'm hoping that this virtual tour presentation will not only keep our desire to travel alive, but also it will give us the possibility of giving a tour director the ability to do what he hasn't had a chance to do in a long time. Today, we're lucky to have a seasoned tour guide from Australia. He's super knowledgeable about his country, and he's very excited to share his passion for his hometown, Sydney, Australia, with all of us. So I'd like to introduce you to my friend from down under, Matt Ermenhazy. Matt, if you're ready, you can join me on the screen and I can hand over this event to you. I know, I practiced your last name and I still messed it up. I am sorry to say I did. Ready to take the controls, Matt? When you're ready, you can come on and share your screen.
Okay, I'm here. Can everyone see me and hear me? I hope you can. Thanks for joining me, everyone, and welcome to Sydney, Australia. I hope you can understand my accent. It's a silly one, but that's all I've got. All right, so thanks for joining me. We're going to learn all about Sydney, Australia. There's a lot that I can share. It's a fascinating place. A lot of different cultures here, a lot of fantastic locations to visit. You're going to love this presentation. I have an interesting background. I was a scout leader as well, also a nature and wildlife tour guide, but I'll get into that. And I'm going to share my screen now and get on with the presentation. So thanks again for joining me. Okay, I'll share the screen. Hopefully this will work. Here we go. So this is the story of Sydney. Welcome to Sydney, Australia, everyone. It's 9 o'clock in the morning. It's 10 degrees outside. It's winter down here. But I don't know what it is where you are. This is me, Matt Ermenhazy. It's a Hungarian last name. My father came here in the 50s. A lot of all Europeans have a short history here in Australia. Europeans have only been here for the last 250 years or so, but I'll get into that in a little bit. So I've been here for over 50 years, almost 60. I'm a nature and wildlife tour guide. That's a more recent thing, and I love doing it because I grew up in the bush near Sydney. exploring the valleys that's right behind me, and there's wallabies and all different types of wildlife just behind me in the bush. When I was 18, I finished high school and I hitchhiked right around Australia for 14 months, and that was a big experience. And I learned a lot about Australia. It's a fascinating place. There's a lot to see here. Too many things to see. Now I'm a documentary maker. So for most of my life, I've been making video. I've been working in video production. I make documentaries of Sydney too, and you're going to see a few of my video clips as well. This is what I'm going to cover today. A quick summary of a short history of Sydney. I'll talk about the different regions in Sydney. So if you do come to Sydney, these are some of the places you can check out. I'll start off with Sydney City. This is around the local, we call it the CBD, Central Business District. For people in the States, you probably call it downtown. We don't call it downtown, we call it the CBD, Central Business District. Then we're going to look at some beaches, some iconic beaches around Sydney. Then we're going to go a bit further north and a bit further south, the South Coast. Oh, the Blue Mountains is out to the west. We're going to look at that's another scenic place. It's all within a day's reach of Sydney, these places. South Coast, Blue Mountains, and the Central Coast. Let's go. All right, so where am I? I am at the bottom of the world. We're on the east coast of Australia. And down south, you can see that little triangle down the bottom. That's Tasmania. That's part of Australia too. Don't forget them, or they'll get upset. And further on the lower right-hand corner, I don't know if you can see it, there's New Zealand over there. Interesting thing about being down here, it's very far south, and we get a lot of southerly winds and swell. So and that affects our weather system. I'll go into that a little bit later. The reason I'm mentioning that is because I surf quite a bit, and when you're out in the bush all the time, the weather plays a big part in what you do and what you see. This is a little bit closer. So Sydney is on the east coast, but we are surrounded by national parks. You can see to the north, there's a Hawkesbury River. The Hawkesbury River, well, to be honest, there's rivers that surround Sydney. It's kind of like a flat valley. On the left-hand side, you can see the Blue Mountains. That's the Great Dividing Range. There's a big chain of mountains that goes all the way up the east coast of Australia, and that kind of protects Sydney from the hot, dry desert, which is further off to the left. And that's the outback. Around this side, we call the green area. We call that the bush, really, because it's greener. We just call it the bush. But further over to the left is the outback. Down south is the Royal National Park. It's the first national park in Australia. Fantastic place. I grew up down there, but now I'm living up near the Hawkesbury River. We're going to visit all around the outside of Sydney, but we'll start off in the centre of Sydney. There's 5 million Sydneysiders here in Sydney. It's a fascinating place. There's 658 suburbs here in Sydney, and they've all got different characteristics. What a lot of people don't realise when they come to Australia is there's so many different cultures here in Sydney itself. But when you get further away from Sydney, it changes. The area of Sydney covers about 13,000 square kilometres, and Sydney is the most populated city in Australia. The first people to be here are the Indigenous people, the Aboriginal people. They've been here for 30,000 years. I think in where I am, they've been in the valley behind me for about 15,000 years. Their descendants still live in suburbia, but no one lives down in the valleys anymore. But the people here hang on to their traditional culture, and it's still rich. I think it's the oldest, well, it's the oldest surviving culture in the world. And you can see on the left-hand side, there's a rock carving. If I go exploring down the back there, I can find carvings and things like that everywhere. So it's a very rich culture, and the Aboriginal people are, they're very proud of their culture, and there's lots of Indigenous food. And when you come to Australia, you can learn a lot about this. The people are very proud about their culture. as always, though, in modern history, there's been a bit of an ugly past. So what happened? Europeans came here about 250 years ago, and that changed Australia dramatically. The first Europeans to come here was Captain Cook in 1770, and they charted the east coast of Australia. The Dutch charted the west, and I believe maybe around that time, the Indonesians were far up north near Timor Strait, Darwin. But yeah, there's a bit of no one's really sure about that. So Captain Cook was the first person to land in the Sydney area, and then not long after that, I think 8 years after that, in 1788, the first fleet of convicts led by Arthur Phillip founded Sydney as a British penal colony. And then, yeah, so there were lots of convicts from the UK came over to Australia, and lots of European Australians have descendants that were, from the old days, the old convicts. And then after that, there was lots of gold rushes, and people come over from Europe and China to go for the gold. And now, since then, there's been a large immigration of people to this very day, lots of different cultures. After World War II, mass immigration became this made Australia into one of the most multicultural cities in the world. This is a snapshot of some of the suburbs in here. I think there's 600 suburbs in Sydney, and this is just a handful of them. And you can see all the different cultures. So if I went to if I went to Burwood, there's a mosque there, and you wouldn't think it was Sydney. The good thing about Sydney is we're away from everything, and it's a very unique culture. But for us to travel overseas, it's a bit of a pain. But for me, if I wanted to have a day in India, I could just go down the road to Harris Park, and I could be submerged in Indian culture. So it's all here, which is fantastic. Very multicultural city. I'll just click a little button down here. 1 second. So I'm going to get into what's around Sydney. So this is our beautiful harbour. This is the centre of Sydney. In fact, on the left-hand side, you can see the high-rises and skyscrapers. That's the hub of Sydney. In the top left, you can see the old part of Sydney. That's called the Rocks. We'll visit there first. To the right of that is the Sydney Harbour Bridge, and the thing like turtles, the white turtles in the front. That's the Sydney Opera House. You can get ferries, and you can travel all around the harbour. It's the best way to see Sydney. So when you come here, you make sure you get a ferry. Okay, let's start our tour. So Sydney, you can see in virtually the centre of the screen, you can see the Sydney Opera House. I'll just go back, and there it is there. So hopefully you can get an understanding or the layout of the picture. The bridge, there's the Opera House, and the bridge. The bridge is, you can see, yes, in the top third, that yellow line going across. There's also a tunnel that goes across the harbour now. Let's go for a walk. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at the Rocks first. The Rocks is the old colonial part of Sydney, and this is where the first convicts where they set up. I'm going to play a short video of this place. This is it now. I filmed this last year. So there's a lot of old colonial buildings, old sandstone buildings. On Sunday, there's amazing markets here. So lots of people visit Australia, and they stay nearby in this area. Fantastic place. This is filmed in summer. It's very different now. It's a bit cold and grey, but in summer, it's a fantastic place to visit. You can see lots of sandstone rocks and buildings around here. It's called the Rocks because it was carved that the convicts had to carve a lot of the buildings out of the rocks in the area. So that's why they call it the rocks. Fascinating place, lots of colonial history in this area. And it's where, I'll just look at my notes. Yeah, so the rocks was given its name by members of the First Fleet. And this was, they had the first convict encampment here. What, sorry? Don't know what happened there. We'll keep walking again. We'll walk around the rocks. So it's a fantastic place to discover. Lots of old shops and souvenir shops around here. And it's perched right on the edge of Sydney Harbour. So you can see the Harbour Bridge in the background. And I'll just go back a bit and show you. There's a bridge in the background. So it's in the shadow of the Sydney Harbour Bridge. Lots of nice cafes. And it's on the edge of the harbour. And you can see the Sydney Opera House. And there is our famous ferries. Make sure you get a ferry to travel across the harbour. It's a fantastic way to see Sydney. And there is looking back over the city. That's the financial hub of Sydney. Just recently, we've had the trams put back in. It's taken many years to get to this point, but the trams have only been going for about a year now, and it's one of our things we're very proud of. It's a great way to get around town. Sydney is very easy to travel around on public transport. You can see a lot of these old colonial buildings, and some of them have been here for 200 years. That's a long time for us. But there are, yeah, it's a long time. 200 years is a long time for us. Lots of old pubs. You can see I'll show you. You can see the city behind it. Lots of old sandstone. Sandstone is a sedimentary rock that is used for carving. They made lots of buildings out of sandstone, and the Aboriginal people would carve their drawings and illustrations on the rocks here. And there's a final shot of the city. So now, that was a quick look at the rocks. Now we'll have a look at the Opera House, which is just across the harbour. You can walk from the rocks to the Opera House in about 10 minutes. So Sydney is or downtown or the CBD. You can walk around it in under half an hour. We're going to look at the Opera House now. So the Opera House is a multi-venue performing arts centre, and it's right on the edge of the harbour. It's massive. It's the jewel of Sydney. The original cost to build the Opera House was about 7 million, or the estimate, but it finished at, it cost $102 million. It was paid for by the state lottery. Amazing place to visit, to walk around. And if you've got a little bit of money, you can go see a show inside. It is amazing to walk around. And you can, from the centre of Sydney, it takes about 10 minutes to walk around here. There are 233 designs submitted for the Opera House in an international design competition held in 1956. But Jon Utzon from Denmark was announced a winner, and he received £5,000 for the design, which isn't much. But it really is an amazing place to visit. Construction was expected to take 4 years. 4 years, but it took 14 years. Work commenced in 1959, and it involved 10,000 construction workers. So it overlooks the harbour. There's lots of bars and eateries on the outside. Right, the best place to eat in Sydney. So these are some of the plans that were submitted. And this is it being built. And you can see on the left-hand side, you can see there's roof tiles. There's more than a million roof tiles on it. And the tiles were made in Sweden. There you go. That's the Opera House. Now we're going to look at, I'm picking up all the big items that you see when or if you come to Australia, and you should come to Australia. This is the things that you see when you're around the city area, and then we're going to travel further out a bit later on. So this is Mrs. Macquarie's Chair. You can see it's just above the Royal Botanic Gardens. So to get to the Mrs. Macquarie's Chair, it's about 20 minutes walk through a beautiful garden, or Sydney's Royal Botanic Gardens. This is all around the harbour. So this is the gardens that you walk through, and there's, whoops, sorry, we'll go back again, sorry about that. It's hard to see my cursor with this, oh, sorry, with this busy background. So it's right next to, oh, here we go, I can see my cursor. That's a shot of me pointing at the sandstone rocks. They're very, they erode easily, and you get these beautiful, I'm passionate about nature and wildlife. So we get these beautiful little caves where birds and plants live. So it's a really nice walk through the gardens, and you come to Mrs. Macquarie's Chair. Mrs. Macquarie was, this rock was carved, hang on a second, was carved out of a sandstone by convicts in 1810. And it's to commemorate Elizabeth. So what would happen is Mrs. Macquarie was the wife of Major General Lachlan Macquarie, who was the governor of New South Wales from 1810 to 1821. And she would sit on this rock and watch the ships coming into the harbour. So she'd sit here on the rock and look out to sea and wait for the ships to bring mail and stuff from. So she'd sit here on the rock and look out to sea and wait for her mail or for people to come from the UK. So it's a beautiful place to, the best thing about it is the views from the place. Like the rock it's just a rock. But it's got fantastic views there. There's a seat, a close up of the seat. But the best thing about this place is the views over the harbour. Just around the corner is a military base. And you can see just in front of us is a swimming pool right in the centre of the city. There's swimming pools all over Sydney. Why go to a swimming pool when you can go to the beach for nothing? The pools here are amazing. Just there, that's a wharf. There's lots of beautiful restaurants on the edge there. Just there, that not many people know this. This building here on the end is where that's Russell Crowe's place. Or maybe he sold it, but that was 26 million, I think it cost him. And like I said, the best thing about visiting Mrs. Macquarie's Chair is the views back over the harbour. So fantastic. It's a fantastic afternoon. Okay, let's keep going. So next we're going to see the Sydney Harbour Bridge. We're going to cross the harbour. Let's go for a quick walk over the bridge. So the bridge was opened in 1932. It's got 6 million rivets, hand-driven rivets. And now to cross the bridge every day, I drive across it often. To cross the bridge, it costs $3.30. But or you can go underneath the bridge, virtually underneath the bridge in a tunnel. We drive across it daily. That's the best way to experience the bridge and to get nice views of the city is to walk across the bridge. Costs you nothing. You get these beautiful views back over the harbour. The steel was imported on the bridge from England. There's the Opera House. Yeah. It took 14,000 men 8 years to build the bridge, and it took 55 years to pay it off. To walk across it, it only takes about 20 minutes, but it's a fascinating walk. You can, there are tours that go to the top of the bridge, and that'll cost you about $300. But you can just walk across it for nothing. You can walk across, you can walk across one side, and on the other side you can cycle across. Just walk across it. All right, so that's Sydney Harbour Bridge. Next, we're going to look at, one moment. Next, we're going to look at Wendy Whiteley's secret garden. Not many people know about this. This is a fascinating place. You can walk there, you can walk across a bridge and spend an afternoon at Wendy Whiteley's secret garden. On the way there, we go past this. This is just a little garden on the way there. This is called the Comic Walk. So you walk across a bridge, and then you end up in Milson's Point, and you can look back over the harbour. But if you walk around the corner, past the Opera House, past Luna Park, which is just there, you come across these little sculptures. These sculptures were put here. These are iconic cartoon characters. These are from cartoons in the 50s. It's just a nice little sculpture walk. You have to look out for it. Not many people know about it, but it's worth looking out for if you know that it's there. But this is on the way to Wendy Whiteley's secret garden, and that is something else. This is Wendy Whiteley's secret garden. Wendy Whiteley is a wife of a famous Australian artist called Brett Whiteley, who died, I think, in the 90s. He was he's a fascinating Brett Whiteley. I'd love to show some pictures, but I can't because of copyright. He was a fascinating artist, and he did some beautiful paintings of Sydney Harbour. Wendy Whiteley and her husband lived in this house and on the edge of Sydney Harbour. So a lot of Brett Whiteley's paintings are of this area. I'm just going to show you some shots of the garden. Oh, sorry. So this is the garden that Wendy Whiteley made. A lot of Brett Whiteley's artwork looks like the trees on the land. Wendy Whiteley made this garden. She cleared up this abandoned railway site, and she put all of these plants, and it's a beautiful garden that you can walk through. There's lots of benches that you can sit in and have a picnic. It really is an amazing afternoon to spend some time down there. All right. Next, we are going to Barangaroo, and Barangaroo is a new precinct right behind the rocks. Barangaroo, Barangaroo was a powerful Aboriginal woman who was married to Bennelong. Where the Opera House is Bennelong Point, and Bennelong was an Aboriginal elder, and Barangaroo was his wife. Let's have a look at Barangaroo. So it's a shopping precinct. Look at this amazing building. This is called Barangaroo House. This is a new precinct, lots of shops, and a great place to visit. Oops, sorry, I'll go back again. Sorry, guys. It's on the edge of Darling Harbour, and there's lots of you can see over here on the left-hand side, these are where the ferry terminals. Lots of cafes, restaurants. And it's also the financial hub of Sydney. It's very new. In fact, I think that here they're still building it. Beautiful place to visit. And it's right in the centre of town. So this is, if you're staying in the city, this is like 5 or 10 minutes down the road. You can walk around the headland, and in the sandstone rocks, there's a little theatre that that shows the history of Sydney and the Aboriginal culture. There's a beautiful walk that goes right around the foreshore of Barangaroo. And then if you keep walking through this park, you can have see views of the Sydney Harbour Bridge. All right. Next, we're going to look at Darling Harbour, which is a little bit further south. This is Darling Harbour at night. Again, this is another area where you come for dinner if you're staying in Sydney. Lots of attractions and things to do for kids as well in this area. Beautiful restaurants. All right, so now we're heading out about a 20-minute drive away from the centre of Sydney. So you need to get, you can get a train or a bus, or yeah, that's a train or a bus. That's the only way you can get to Bondi. Bondi is our most famous beach in Sydney. So the best way to I think to explore Bondi is to get a bus to Coogee. And Coogee is a suburb just south of Bondi, and then you walk for 5 kilometres if you're up for walking along the beach for 5 kilometres, or the coastline for 5 kilometres. It really is amazing. The beaches here are beautiful. Coogee is a beautiful beach. Coogee is a more protected beach from the big southerly swells that I mentioned at the start of this presentation. We do have sharks, but you really don't have to worry about them. The thing to worry about in Sydney is the rips. So you just have to always swim between the red and yellow flags. We have these beautiful little bays here on the walk up from Coogee to Bondi. You have these beautiful bays. For me, it's almost like the Mediterranean. Lots of diving and snorkeling in these little bays. It really is a beautiful walk. Bit of high-speed motion there. In here, Clovelly Beach, if you're not scared of snorkeling, in here there are these beautiful blue groper fish that you can go snorkeling. You know, it's very shallow in there. You can see these beautiful big blue fish. There we go. There's a blue groper. That's down the bottom there. The walk goes past an old cemetery, and it goes up the coast all the way to Bondi. It's about a 5 kilometre walk. It takes maybe 3 hours to do for a leisurely walk. There's Bondi up in the distance. And it's always best to walk from Coogee north. That way, yeah, when you get to Bondi, there's lots of nice restaurants to eat at. There's the old cemetery that you pass. Beautiful coastline all around Sydney. And in some of these areas, there's Aboriginal carvings on the sandstone rocks as well that you can look out for. Lots of free swimming pools. All the beaches in Australia are free. We don't pay for beaches here. That's what people do here on the weekends. We go to the beach and we relax. And there's always cafes and nice places to eat on the edge. Surfing beaches. This is Tamarama or Glamorama. This is where the glamorous people of Sydney live. They have a bit of money to live here. But you can see, well, I'll just go back a bit. You can see the red and yellow flags on the beach. You always have to swim between these. This is one of our most dangerous beaches because it's a narrow beach. The big waves come in. I think this is one of the most dangerous beaches in Australia. So you swim, there's not much space between the yellow and red flags, but that's where you have to swim. It's a surf club and people surfing. So it's a beautiful walk, and there is Bondi. So let's walk up to Bondi. And more sandstone rocks. This is Bondi Beach. When you come to Sydney, you have to see Bondi Beach. It's our most famous beach, but it's, I've got to be honest, it's not our most beautiful beach. It is beautiful, but there's nicer beaches, I think. Just in front of us is the Bondi Iceberg swimming pool. People do laps all in that, oh, sorry, people do laps up and down that pool all year long, middle of winter as well. Bondi baths. There's a little skate park at the southern end. Lots of parkland to have fish and chips on. Fish and chips is almost like our national dish here, unfortunately. This is on the walk up the coast. I filmed this in winter, so it looks a little bit drab. But people are, it's always busy all year round. In summer, it gets very crowded down here. You may have seen that TV show Bondi Rescue. That's all filmed just here. All right, so now we're going to another beach. I think when you come to Australia, have a look at Bondi. It's on your to-do list. But the other thing to do is to go to Manly Beach. Manly Beach is, I think it's better. And one of the best things about going to Manly Beach is actually getting there. So what you do is you get a ferry. See the red line? That's a ferry route. It goes from Sydney and it passes the Sydney Harbour Bridge and the Opera House. So you get beautiful views of the Harbour Bridge and the Opera House. So this is where you get the ferry from Circular Quay, which is downtown Sydney. And the ferry, this is on the ferry now, the ferry goes past the Opera House and past the Harbour Bridge. I think it's by far the best way to see Sydney. It's a 30-minute trip. I think this is a faster jet cat. But if you get the slow ferry, it's just as much fun. On some days when the seas are really big, it's a lot of fun on the ferry as well. It goes past the heads and it does get a bit rough. We go past lots of beautiful little beaches. Yeah, so you can see the heads here. So here, sometimes there's giant swell that come through and you can have a rough ride going across the harbour. And you'll end up in Manly. Manly is on the northern beaches of Sydney. This is Manly Wharf. And it's a great day out at Manly. Very different to Bondi. All right, let's have a look at Manly. So Manly is one of my favourite places in Sydney. I used to live here. I liked it so much. Let's play the video. So there's this fantastic walk that you can do along the Esplanade. And if you head south, south is to the right-hand side on the beaches. Whoops, what have I done? Oh, sorry. Yeah, if you head south, you can see some amazing coastline. And there's lots of cafes and restaurants in this area as well. This is heading south. Oh, I thought I left that out, but there's lots of surfing here. This is heading south. Red and yellow flags. It's always busy here. It's a great family beach too. Great place to learn to surf. And at the just here, I've been snorkeling here. Everyone goes snorkeling here. One of the times I did this maybe 10 years ago, I went snorkeling there, and I saw some sharks. I was there with my 12-year-old daughter, just here, just in this little bay here. And I got out and I was panicking. I ran around telling everyone. The sharks were about as large as me. And I got out of the water with my daughter and was warning everyone. And the locals were saying, don't worry, they're there all the time. But they don't hurt you. They're called bronze whalers. Beautiful little cafes around the area. So there you go. That's Manly. Oh, we'll end on that shot. Dusky whalers. All right. But they don't hurt you, apparently. Let's go down the south coast now. South coast is where I grew up. There's beautiful national parks down there, Royal National Park. Lots of places to swim. And great, you need a car to travel down this far. There's beautiful drives all around the coast. This Seacliff Bridge has only been there for about the last 6 years, but it opens up the south coast. It really is a fascinating place to go exploring. And when you head a bit further south and you go up a bit higher into the mountains, you come to the Southern Highlands, and there's lots of waterfalls and mountain ranges to explore. So now we're heading out west to the Blue Mountains, and this is another day trip from Sydney. On the way out to the Blue Mountains, lots of people stop at Featherdale. Featherdale is a place where you can pet kangaroos. But the Blue Mountains is a spectacular place to visit. Lots of scenic railways up there and restaurants, places to stay. But usually people come here, when they come to Australia, they just go out there for a day visit. Down in the valleys, it's the closest thing that we have to the outback. Great, there's lots of vineyards down there if you're into wine. Beautiful restaurants down in the valleys. And there's other scenic valleys that are kind of inaccessible unless you want to do some big day hikes. Beautiful hikes down here through blue gum forest, rainforest as well. It's well worth the day visit heading out from Sydney up into the Blue Mountains. Next, we're going to the Central Coast, which is where I am. I'm about 15 minutes away from there. Got another video to play. All around Sydney, there's national parks. I think I mentioned that before. There's kangaroos. There's kangaroos in the national parks and not in the beaches around Sydney. On the south coast, there's kangaroos on the beaches, places like Pebbly Beach. And up near the Central Coast, there's kangaroos. You won't find kangaroos in the city, but there's wallabies in the valleys. There are koalas, but again, koalas are they're a threatened species. The best place to see koalas is in a nature reserve. I visited a place called Walkabout Park. Remember that, walkaboutpark.com.au if you want to see koalas. It's an animal sanctuary and they have koalas that are in natural settings. You can see koalas in zoos. There are koalas in the wild, but they're very hard to see. Beautiful thing about the Central Coast is that it's like they're quiet beaches. Not many people there, well, not as many as Bondi and the city beaches. Beautiful coastline, lots of fishing, hiking around the coast. And you can find your own private beach where no one else will be. In Sydney, people tend to go for holidays either up the coast or down the coast. The Central Coast, this beach here is called Avoca Beach. It's very popular for people that come up from Sydney to get away from the crowds of the city. And it's only about an hour and a half away from Sydney. There's beautiful rock pools. Whoops, sorry, I'll go back. Beautiful rock pools. Just here, this rock pool here, it's about 8 foot deep. You can swim in it if you're scared of swimming in the big seas. And in summer, there's whole families swimming in these rock pools. This place is, I found this just last year. This is not far from my home. There's carvings here, Aboriginal carvings in the area. A lot of ancient history around here, which is one of my passions. I'll just go back. That's a carving of a woman on a rock and a carving of a man. That's maybe 5 minutes from here. This is at the Animal Sanctuary at Walkabout Park. Like I said, there's lots of kangaroos in zoos, but why go to a zoo when you can go to this is like a natural setting. There's kangaroos everywhere. These are the swimming holes that I was mentioning before. That's where families swim in summer. Great fishing, amazing coastline around Sydney. And pelicans, we have giant pelicans. So there you go. So that is my quick tour of Sydney. I hope you enjoyed that. That showed Sydney and the local environment. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen now, or maybe. There we go. That's it, Mara.
Yeah, I'm going to jump on here. So that was great. Thank you very much. It's a great way to see Sydney. I have a bunch of questions. I'd like to go through some of them for you, and then we can kind of get a sense of what else there is and to add on to what you've already given us. So are you ready for me to fire away? Why don't you tell us a little bit about the temperatures, Matt? Let's talk about the 4 seasons. When are those seasons? What's the warmest and the coldest it gets? Does it snow? Do you have rainy seasons? So talk a little bit about the weather.
Okay, the weather here in Sydney. So at the moment it's winter. The best time to visit Sydney is from September to April. September is springtime here, and around Christmas time is our summer. Yeah, winter, it's still beautiful here in winter, but really when you come to Sydney or Australia, it's best to come in the summer when you can visit all the beaches.
What are the temperatures, Matt, in those seasons?
At the moment, it's about 10 degrees here, and it gets to 10 to 15 degrees in winter. In summer, it gets anywhere from up as high as 35 degrees, sometimes 40.
We're dealing with Celsius.
Yeah, Celsius.
Yeah.
So sometimes it reaches
no snow, Matt?
No snow in Sydney at all.
Okay.
There's snow, but that's about 4 hours away, 4 hours south from here. Yeah, no snow around Sydney. So it's always temperate climate around here.
Okay, great. So why don't you talk to us a little bit about the arts in Sydney? So we talked about the Sydney Opera House, which I assume, because I've been there, has opera, has dance, has some theater. Do you have is there a large theater district other than the Opera House, or does the Opera House carry most of the performing arts?
The Opera House is, I think it's the cultural hub of Sydney, but there are lots of theatres around, the State Theatre, the Entertainment Centre in Sydney. There's yeah, I've got to be honest, I don't know much about that side of Sydney, but there's all different types of venues in Sydney.
Okay, let's talk about the zoos. We talked about some of the preserves. Are there? Yeah, so you want to?
Yes, so one of the tours that you can do is you can get a ferry from Sydney Harbour, across the harbour to Taronga Zoo, and that's a excuse me, a beautiful day trip across. And you go to Taronga Zoo. Taronga Zoo is perched on the harbour, overlooks the harbour, and it's got everything there. There's also an aquatic centre in Darling Harbour, where you can learn all about marine life. There's also the two main ones, I think, is Taronga Zoo and the Aquatic Centre in Darling Harbour.
Who runs this opera house? Is it privately owned or is it government owned?
It's government owned. So yeah, fascinating. It's one of the things you can do is the best thing to do, or the best day that you can have in Sydney, I think, is to start off in the morning at the Opera House, and then in the afternoon get the ferry across to Manly, and then on the way home, maybe have a nice meal at Manly, and then get the ferry back across, and you'll see the Opera House at night. So yeah,
Okay,
best
so
way to spend a day in Sydney.
you just hit on my next topic. You said catch a meal in Manly. Let's talk about the food. What are some particular foods that are specific to Australia? What would be a typical food that you have there? And also, are you as a culture, do you go out a lot? Do you eat in? What's the food scene like?
Yeah, so as I mentioned before, Sydney is a very multicultural city, and it's hard to know what our real what our national food is. Everyone has a different opinion. A lot of people say the meat pies is the thing, or fish and chips, and they're kind of English. There's a suburb in Sydney, and I think it's almost like the suburban cultural centre of Sydney, called Newtown. Whatever type of cuisine you're after, it's there, and it's only 5 or 10 minutes drive from the centre of Sydney. You can get a bus fare from the centre of Sydney. There is Indigenous food. You can buy things like seeds or macadamias. That's starting to become bigger on the market, the local Indigenous food. But I think Australia doesn't really have a national dish. Yeah, I have to say fish and chips is the national dish. There's a place in Woolloomooloo, which is downtown Sydney. Woolloomooloo's got eight O's, sorry, Woolloomooloo. Woolloomooloo is famous for its pies. You can get these Aussie pies from there, and that's a 5-minute walk down from the centre of town. So
One of our travelers,
sorry?
one of our travelers spoke about a restaurant trolley. Does that still exist?
A restaurant trolley?
Yeah. Not something you're aware of?
No.
Well, I know that when we went to Australia, we had a food challenge to make sure that we were getting all of the specific foods of the region. And I know the Vegemite is something we don't have here that was
Yes.
on there. And then what's the ice cream, Matt, that's very specific to Australia?
Ice cream.
It's like a honeycomb, but it's not.
I think that's hokey pokey, but I think
Hokey pokey, exactly.
yeah,
That's exactly what it is.
I think that's a Kiwi invention.
Oh, you do? Okay.
Yeah, pavlova is another thing that's Australian. I think that big fluffy cake thing. Pavlova.
We were very
Lamingtons.
fortunate. We were fortunate to be hosted by a group of Girl Guides when we went to Australia, and they hosted us with a sausage sizzle, and we had the bread with the sprinkles on it, and butter, which you call what?
Fairy bread.
Fairy bread,
Fairy
exactly.
bread. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
So those were some of the things that I guess kids would normally eat, right?
Yeah. We
Yeah.
don't have. Everyone thinks that people drink Fosters down here. No one ever drinks Fosters in Australia. That's
Let's talk about the modern day culture. How safe is it around Sydney and its suburbs? And can you talk about the cost of living and some other things that would be of interest?
Sydney is safe. When you come to Australia, the only thing to worry about, and I've touched on this before, is swim between the red and yellow flags. The beaches can be dangerous, and lots of people, they go to Bondi, and the first thing they do is they come down and they jump straight in the water, and they get sucked out in the Backpacker Express, which is a rip or a tide current that takes people out. So you must swim between the red and yellow flags. But in general, Sydney is a really safe city. People are out at all hours, and it's safe for women to walk out at night. Go with a bloke if you can, but it's a safe city.
Yeah.
Cost of living, I think it'd be on par with America. Average home in Australia is about $700,000 US. So it's an expensive place to live, but it's a beautiful place to live. A meal would be, say, in a restaurant is maybe $10 US. Public transport is cheap. To have a ticket for a day anywhere in Sydney, maybe $10 US, and you can get around quite a bit. So the best place to explore Sydney is on public transport, and it's very efficient. You can get everywhere.
So does that include the ferries in terms of pricing?
Yes.
People have been asking, do the ferries cost? Do you have passes for them? Also the beaches, do you have to pay for your beaches?
Yeah, so when you come to Australia, the best thing to do is to buy yourself one of these things. It's an Opal card. Oh, I don't have it with me. An Opal card. It's an Opal card. An Opal card will get you anywhere in Sydney. So that cost me $20, and I use that for about a week, and I can go anywhere on buses, trains, ferries. Great way to see Sydney. What was the other question you asked me?
So the question was about pricing. Do you have to pay to go on the beach, to access the beach?
No, you never pay for any beaches. You pay at public swimming pools, but no beaches that I know of in Australia do you have to pay for. It'd be un-Australian to pay to go to a beach.
Yes, it would be, right? Since Australia is such a huge country, do you have different accents for different regions?
Yes, we do, but I think only Australians would notice them. Like in New Zealand, in Melbourne, they say things like, we say elephant, they say elephant. Elephant. They're little subtle things. It's for us. Yeah, it's hard for Australians to notice, but there is South Australia, Western Australia, and Victoria. We'll have subtly different accents, and Queenslanders, which is up north, they have a more stereotypical Australian. G'day, how's it going?
So one of the things that I don't think you spoke about in detail, but I would like you to, because this was a little bit shocking to me as I was at our sausage sizzle along the beach, and there was no swimming because of the crocodiles. Can you talk about saltwater crocodiles and what the differences are there, and how that impacts your region?
Okay, the crocodiles here are non-existent. They're only up in the tropics. They are, I've got to be honest, about 2 days drive from here, maybe 1,500 kilometers away or further. So that's more of a tropical thing. Down here south, we don't have crocodiles, but what we do have are sharks. There's sharks on all over the coastline, but you won't see them. Sharks hang around in the rocky headlands and islands, but the beaches, they kind of skirt past the beaches. You really don't have to worry about sharks. No crocodiles down here at all, but there are sharks. The sharks are everywhere. Being an ex-surfer, I know they're out there. You see them, but they won't bother you. I think more people die of bee stings in Australia than shark attacks. Well, there has been quite a few shark attacks in the last year.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about a tour to Sydney. If we were going to put Sydney on our itinerary for a travel, how many days do you think would be necessary to see everything that you showed us in detail?
1 week. 1 week. Often my guests on my private guided tour, they're here for a week, and you can see a lot in a week. You can spend maybe 2 or 3 days in the city, and then after that you kind of citied out, and then it's good to get out of the city and go either up the coast or down the coast, or to the Blue Mountains. And you can spend a day up north, a day out west in the Blue Mountains, or a day down south. But yeah, I think 3 days in the city is enough. You can spend another day at Bondi Beach as well. But I think a week is good. And Sydney, you can see a lot in a week, like a heck of a lot of Australia in 1 week.
I know one thing about Sydney, it's a very walkable city. That was one thing that I really enjoyed about it, that you could really get around a lot of the actual city by
Yes.
walking and feel really comfortable there. So I thought that was great. And we also did the ferries out to some of the beaches that you spoke
Yeah.
about, which was really
Another good
great.
thing to do, if your game is you can hire these electric bicycles to go around the foreshore of Sydney Harbour
Lazy
because it's
bikes,
all
right?
flat. Sorry?
Lazy bikes.
Yes, yeah. It's the best way to. Honestly, I think it's the best way to explore the foreshore of Sydney. It's just to hop on, apart from the ferry, it's just to hop on a bike, hire a bike for 2 hours. Lots of bike hire places. I think one's called Sydney Harbour Bike Tours. Fantastic. Best way to explore Sydney.
While we're on the references, you spoke of a website for the koala bears. Some people missed that. I'm gonna type it into the
Yes.
chat. What was the website?
Yeah. So these are good friends of mine. It's called walkaboutpark.com.au. Walkabout Park. So Walkabout Park is an animal sanctuary, and it doesn't look like a zoo. It's there's no four walls there. It's a natural setting. So you go to this park and the animals come to you. So if you go there first thing in the morning, they put a little bit of feed out, and there'll be 50 wallabies and kangaroos that come up to you, emus, and you can pat the kangaroos, and you can hug an emu. Have you ever hugged an emu, Mara?
I have not.
It's it's like hugging an aunt. it's the most surreal thing. Yeah, so Walkabout Park. It really is amazing. I think there's a good website. Great day. You can also stay overnight up there as well.
I know another thing the whole world came around was the fires. Could you give us a progress update on what's happened and where you are now?
Yeah, so the bushfires happened almost 2 years ago, maybe a year and a half ago, and they were devastating. In fact, the fires were alight for 1 year. They started in the Blue Mountains, and the reason they started is because, okay, I'm going to get a little bit. For thousands of years, Aboriginal people have looked after the land. They would burn off the bush every 15 years to put in so grasses can grow. And when the grasses grow, then animals can feed. Animals like large game, like wallabies and wombats and kangaroos and emus. Aboriginal people have been burning the land so the grasses can grow, so large game can graze on it. And we know that because the Europeans, when they first came to Sydney, they noticed that there's large parkland everywhere. And there's trees every 40 foot. They wrote this in their journals. They said, every 40 foot, there's a tree, and then there's grass, and there's animals everywhere, almost like Africa. So the reason there's lots of grass is because the Aboriginal would burn off the land and the grasses will grow. And they get rid of all this dead wood. There's dead wood everywhere in all the valleys. When there's no regular back burning, there's an accumulation of dead wood everywhere. And so I know behind us, we have 100 years of dead wood there, ready to go up. Because in modern European culture, we don't burn off the land every 15 years. We just let it go. We don't know what to do. But the Aboriginal people have been living here for 15,000 years in this valley behind me. So that's why the fires, that's why they started, because I think it was lightning that hit in the Blue Mountains, and the fires went for 1 year, burning through a landscape where there hadn't been a fire for maybe 100 years. So that's what caused all the problems. And because of that, now we've learned that the traditional, the Indigenous people, they had it right. They had an understanding of how to use the land. So now we're learning from that, and we're consulting with the Indigenous people, Aboriginal elders. We're learning about the correct time of year and how and where and when to burn the land, to encourage grasses so larger game can flourish. Like behind me are caves and charcoal drawings of emus. No, I don't think any Europeans have ever seen an emu. There's charcoal drawings of emus here. No one's ever seen an emu here, but they were here. So yeah, so now we're learning that the old ways were the best ways. And so if you go to Walkabout Park, they have you can learn about things like this, about the traditional methods of looking after the land. So
Wow, that's
yeah.
really interesting. Thanks for sharing that. Let's talk about the comments you made about the suburbs of Sydney and how segregated they are in terms of nationalities. Is that typical in this day and age, or is that just how they came about originally? Talk
I wouldn't
about like,
say,
yeah, go ahead.
yeah, I wouldn't say they're segregated. They're not segregated at all. It's all, it's very multicultural, but one community will establish in a certain area, and then it'll attract more people from overseas. And to be honest, if there's for example, say there's an Indian community, they set up in an area, then there'll be grocers and local shops there. And for me to go traveling, I just if I want to go to a Vietnamese community, I go to Cabramatta, which is maybe half an hour away, and I can immerse myself in Vietnamese culture, or Greek, or Italian, or so. It's fantastic, because honestly, it's a lot of money to go to Europe, and Australia. Australia is Australasia. We're at the southern end of Asia, and there's a large Chinese community, maybe half an hour from here. And yeah, whatever type of, if you want to immerse yourself in a different culture every night, like I said, there's hundreds of 600 different suburbs, I think, in Sydney. Did I say that? 600? Anyway, there's a lot of different suburbs, but the ones closest to the city, they have different ethnic majorities. So it's fascinating. Why travel overseas? It's all here.
So many foreigners outside of Australia are fascinated by the kangaroo. Are they pets? Are they food? Tell us about them, other than seeing them in sanctuaries or preserves.
Okay, I'm vegetarian. It's food, and it's pet food. You can buy it in local supermarkets.
So you're not keeping a kangaroo as a pet, right?
No,
No.
no. You don't see that many kangaroos and wallabies around Sydney anyway. If you go to, there's beaches down south, a beach called Pebbly Beach in Durras, Durras. There's kangaroos on the beaches there, and they're asleep in people's front yards. But for the most part around Sydney, you don't see kangaroos all over the place. Further out west, you see a lot of them. In fact, they're in play proportions, and I think that's why they make them into, they can.
And here is the million-dollar question of the day. What is the COVID situation in Sydney? How locked down are you? How open are your borders? And when do you expect them to be open to foreigners?
At the moment, I think we have about 20 cases of COVID in Sydney, roughly. And so for the first time we're starting to get into panic mode at the moment. But like I said, we've only had 20 cases in Sydney recently. I think all up in Australia, we've had maybe just over 700 cases of COVID, or COVID deaths. Australia is cut off from the rest of the world. And I don't think we're going to open up Australia. Yeah, I don't think we're going to open up the borders to the rest of the world until at least another year, a year and a half. It's been devastating for tourism. We're just, no one can come into the country, and no one can leave the country, or it's very hard to. And for the most part, we've been very lucky down here. Like only recently we've had 20 cases, and for almost a year, very little cases at all. And I think we can do that because we're an island. We can isolate ourselves and cut off from the rest of the world. So, but I think if you want to come to Australia, no one knows. No one in Australia, the government doesn't know. I'd say at least another year.
Wow, that
Yeah, no
is
one's allowed into the country for another year. The best way to see Sydney is maybe look at videos on YouTube. That's
yeah,
the reality. Yeah,
that is a harsh reality, very
it
harsh
is. It
reality.
is, and especially for people that work in tourism. What has happened though, what's changed though, is there's been a lot of domestic tourism where people are getting out of their getting out and exploring the national parks. The national parks are got lots of visitors now. And it's what's happening is all the infrastructure is opening up for domestic tourism, and there's been a shift from international tourism to domestic tourism. So, and that's a great thing because people are exploring more of their backyard. And so when Australia does open up again, it's Australia will be ready for everyone. So yeah, we haven't stopped.
I think that's
Um,
actually a pretty global a globally happening, is that everybody's looking in their own countries for what they can explore and
yes,
discover. And quite honestly, it's awesome.
yeah,
Just from my own perspective, I recently went to a region in my country that I had never seen. So I will just put a little plug in there that even if you are exploring your own country, every city and every state and every province and every suburb, they all have guides. So take advantage of the
yes,
guides everywhere because it is a completely different experience
definitely,
if you use a guide versus just exploring it on your own. And the things you discover are far more interesting with a guide's perspective. So that's just
mm,
a little plug there. I'm an
yeah.
advocate for guiding all over the world, and I know that I appreciate it and I learn so much from them. So let's go back to animals, since Australia is obviously a place that is so enticing for its animals. Tell us what's the difference between a kangaroo and a wallaby?
Kangaroos, there's all different types of kangaroos, wallabies, wallaroos, quokkas. Um, the difference between a kangaroo and a wallaby, kangaroos have big, thick tails. And we have wallabies here. They're smaller, they're more agile. Well, agile. They're all agile, but wallabies are the ones around here. They're smaller. They've got thinner tails. Uh, Kangaroos have fatter tails, thicker tails, and it's almost kangaroos can't lean backwards. Wallabies can, I think. So uh, kangaroos are just smaller and more agile for
So I
hopping on.
guess it's
Sorry,
not
wallabies are
much.
small.
Is
Sorry,
the answer not much then? There's not much difference?
size. I'd say
Yeah,
size.
size,
Yeah,
right?
and
Size.
kangaroos are. I think kangaroos are more of a grassland thing. The wallabies are more kind of bush and rocky areas.
So I know
But then there's wallaroos, which are completely unique.
a whole nother species, right?
Yeah.
So I know one of my travelers was really consumed with the press that Australia gets for its spiders and snakes. What about those spiders? Do you have to be concerned about them in Sydney or in the area around it?
No.
I mean, the spiders are huge, right? They're not like our spiders. They're
Yeah. I'm looking up and I'm looking at a spider web and I just said no. But I just know there's a big spider web here. In fact, yeah. No, don't worry about them.
Okay, so you've said you don't need to be concerned about spiders. You don't need to be concerned
I'm
about
looking at a
crocodiles.
spider,
You don't
a
need to be
giant spider
concerned
web.
about sharks. I'm thinking that one of those we should at least be concerned about one of them. I'm not
Yeah.
sure.
Look, we do have spiders, the funnel webs and redbacks, and I have been bitten by a redback spider, which is it's your black widow.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I've been camping down the bush for a long time, and if you go off the beaten track, and if you're staying overnight in a sleeping bag in the bush and not staying in a tent, then you'll get bitten by a spider. Otherwise, you don't have to worry about spiders. Snakes, often I can spend months down in the bush. I'll go down every day for a month or two, and I might see one snake, and it's probably a non-venomous snake. So they are here, but you've really got to go out of your way to see them. And it's a bit of a media beat up. People say that everything in Australia wants to kill you. Well, yeah, but if you sleep in the bush every day, then something will bite you. I'll go when I'm down in the bush, and I go down for weeks on end. Um, I might get a tick or two, or a leech. and then you just deal with that. But
Okay,
there
I'm
are
moving
snakes and
on.
spiders.
At the word of
Someone
leech,
said,
I'm moving on to the next question. Give us a sense of how large your country actually is. Like Sydney to Melbourne. What's the
Sydney to
distance?
Melbourne, it's about an 11, 12 hours drive. Sydney to Brisbane, which is in the capital of Queensland, is another 12 hours drive. To the far north of Australia from Sydney, it's about, or going up to the Great Barrier Reef, it's at least 2 days drive. It's a big place, and that's going up the east coast. It's maybe 2 or 3 days to get to the very top of Australia. To get across to Western Australia, you're looking at a 5-day solid drive, big drive, 5 days or more, 6 days. It's a long way to go. As I showed on my early slides, the east coast of Australia has this great dividing range. And so on the east coast of Australia, it's very temperate. It's cooler. It traps that mountain range traps in the moisture. And then when you go over the other side of the mountain range, then you get into the desert, the dry areas, and it's completely different. That's where you see more kangaroos and birds that live on seeds rather than sort of galahs, not cockatoos. Sorry, I'm going off on a tangent. But yeah, the landscape is very, very different out that way. It's more, we call that the outback. The dirt is red. On this side, this is a sandstone basin. The Sydney basin is sandstone.
We have a few more minutes to wrap up here, and I'm going to give you an opportunity. I hope I don't put you on the spot, but based on your background, I think you can answer this. I'm going to give you an opportunity to share with the audience a few good movies that represent your area or your country, as well as maybe some books. So what would you want to throw out there as some recommendations?
My favorite movie, there's a few. I have a big appreciation for Indigenous culture, and I think 10 Canoes is one of my favorite movies. Have a look at 10 Canoes. It's about 10 Canoes. And that was directed by a local. That's set, I think, maybe 10,000 years ago. It's like how, before Europeans came here. So it's a fascinating movie. Another one, and this is from the early 70s, and I can relate to it because my childhood was in the 70s, growing up in Sydney, having an infinite, bush backyard. It's called, gets a little bit surreal because it's from the 70s. It's called Walkabout. That's another fascinating movie. And it's about a family. It's not exactly child friendly, the start of it, but then it's about a family that gets lost out in the desert and gets looked after by the Indigenous people. It's a fascinating movie. So I think they're my two favorite Australian movies. Books. It'll come to me. I've got the name of it. Hang on. Dark Emu. Yeah, my wife just mentioned it. It's next to my bed. Dark Emu. It's written by a guy that talks about the agriculture that Aboriginal people use. Yeah, have a look at Dark Emu. That's my favourite Australian book. It's all about the history and how Indigenous people looked after the land, and that's where I've learned a lot from that. Dark Emu.
Those are great recommendations, and also wonderful that they point back to the Indigenous people, because I think, as far as my understanding is and the education that I've gained through my visits to Australia, Australia is making a point to show the appreciation again to the Indigenous people, and we realize that during the history of Australia, they weren't treated necessarily most wonderfully, but now there is a deep appreciation and a real push to make sure that they are understood and the history is is brought back so that people understand where the country came from. So those are great
Exactly.
recommendations. Thank you.
Yeah.
All
Thank
right,
you.
everybody. I think we have gotten to about an hour and a half here, so we're going to wrap it up. But thank you very much for joining us, and Matt, thank you very much for bringing your hometown, your city, and your area to us. So thanks a lot, everybody, and have a great
Thank you.
rest of your day.